Talk about take responsibility for the accuracy of your work. Go out and get original sources and make sure you take responsibility. So the next one is remember that neither speed nor format excuses inaccuracy. I think this is an important thing, especially in today's day and age, that oftentimes we think, you want to get the story out. And you go to TV news, and oftentimes they'll be talking, well, we're hearing reports of this. Now, we don't know if it's true. Well, when you're telling stuff that you're not sure is true, you're kind of sacrificing accuracy. You're basically relying upon, well, I just hope people will trust that I could be wrong and not hold that against me. Well, that's probably true. People probably won't hold it against you. But that doesn't make it the right way to do it. You want to be as accurate as possible. Because once something is out there, once it's on the TV, if somebody sees that, turns off the TV, and you just told them, well, we heard that 12 people are dead and that a terrorist is on the loose, well, then people are going around the rest of their day thinking there's a terrorist on the loose and 12 people are dead. And they may not hear the follow-up. As a matter of fact, sometimes you hear people, and as a person who has worked in the media and oftentimes follows the story from its start to its completion, I oftentimes hear people and I realize they have not heard the whole story. They haven't heard oh yeah, I heard there was a shooting. Oh yeah, 3 people were dead. Oh, I hadn't heard that. People will say that kind of thing later. Well, the reality is that people hear one part. You don't want to tell them something is inaccurate early on. I give an assignment in which, in which we do kind of a breaking news story in which we have a person who is basically being shot or killed, and we're kind of dealing with the accuracy of that. And what am I trying to say? So we sometimes I do a story like that, and about the accuracy or whatever, in which like this person is shot or killed, but the case is one of the things I do is I give you kind of false or misleading information, and you have an inclination to get as much information out there because you want to get it on the news, the breaking website news. You want to get it on TV, etc. And so what happens is you give information that at the end of the day is inaccurate. It's not as accurate as it could be because you're trying to get the information out there. So don't let the fact you want to be the first one to the story keep you from getting it right. Make sure you're accurate. And I think what I was saying, in today's modern age, where there's breaking news, where there's website updates, where there's Twitter, we have a tendency to think, oh, I got an idea, I'll tweet it, and if I'm wrong, I'll just retweet that I was wrong. Well, if you're going to be a journalist, then you need to uphold that standard even in your tweets. You need to make sure what you're giving is accurate. Because otherwise people are like, it's just him spouting off again on Twitter. You only put things out there when you're certain, because these things have a tendency to stay there beyond. And if people only see the first tweet and they don't see the tweet that says, oops, I had that wrong, then those people are going around with false information. And that's not good. Because eventually they get told, no, that was wrong. And they say, well, I read it from Joe, and Joe told me it was this way. Well, Joe wasn't accurate because he was more interested in getting the story out quickly. Provide context. Take special care not to misrepresent or oversimplify in promoting, previewing, or summarizing a story. As far as this goes, the idea here is don't just simplify things. Give the full story. Oftentimes, like when I was in graduate school in philosophy, would have been like 1999, 2001. I was at Texas A&M, and in 1999, most of you would not even probably be aware of this. They used to do this thing where they'd have a huge fire on the front of the campus and everybody on, not everybody, but tens of thousands of people would come out right before Thanksgiving, and they would do this huge bonfire. When I say huge, I mean they would take logs, full-size tree trunks, and they would build it into like a wedding cake, a tiered wedding cake form, and they would so it'd have like 3 tiers, and each one's like 20, 30-foot logs, and they would stack those logs up, 80 feet, 100 feet in the air. I don't know exactly how tall it was. It was at least 60 or 70 feet into the air, and they would build this huge thing. They would pile these logs around it. So this thing was absolutely mammoth. I mean, the thing was 60, 70 feet in the air, probably, 100 feet, 50 feet across circumference, just logs, just piled on there. And then they would soak it in fuel, and they would light it on fire, and it would shoot flames, hundreds of feet into the air, and everybody, tens of thousands of people would come out, And they would do this to celebrate the game against University of Texas. Well, while they were building it, they would have student workers building it with lots of equipment and probably a little bit of oversight, but mainly it was student workers. I mean, if there was any professional oversight, it was merely to show the students how to run the equipment, and then they did it themselves. But so they would do this. Well, at some point, the weight shifted, something happened, and the entire structure fell over. And it killed 11 or 12 kids, college students. So, why do I tell this? Well, there's a story, and the simple thing is that the thing fell over. But they did an engineering report, and I watched the report. I probably still have the report somewhere. I probably recorded it or whatever and have it somewhere. But, like it was a video report. And I probably still have it somewhere. But the case is one of the things that was interesting was that the collapse was not just as simple as, the weight shifted, or there was wind, or there was something else. I mean, there were about 6 or 7 complicating factors that all led to it. Part of it was groupthink. Part of it was the ground they were building on was not perfectly level. Part of it was that they, had not done this or that they were doing this thing where they were wedging the things in, causing structural weakness in the bundles of wood that they had tied. I mean, I'm not even going to go into it because you'd have to read the report. But I mean, there were several significant engineering factors. And so if you just put it as a simple, they built it on an angle, or the people weren't thinking right, or these kids were out there drinking, or you could oversimplify it. You really should tell the whole story. Obviously as a journalist, you've got to tell the story quickly, but you should also provide the entire context, provide the entire story. Don't just oversimplify it in order to get it done. You want the full story, and sometimes that takes a lot more, but that is the best way to tell the story. Gather, update, and correct information throughout the life of a news story. I talk about trying to get it accurately the first time, but don't be afraid to say, we got it wrong previously, and change it. If something changes, make sure to follow it up. Don't just go, that was yesterday's news. If there's some little development, you can put something short online or in a newspaper or on a TV show. Oh, one quick development from yesterday's story. That kind of thing. It doesn't take more than a few seconds. You update it, and that way people continue to get the information. Don't just rely upon what you had the first day, and don't bother to continue to look at it and to continue to go out and gather information. Don't rely upon the old story in order to do it. Double check everything, because sometimes what happens is people, even like sources you talk to, they give you one version. The next day, after the story's out, they read it and they realize you got something inaccurate. If you call them up because there's more information in the story, they might tell you got something wrong, and then you can have an even better story. Remember, your job is to inform the public. Your job is not to, just get to meet people and write stuff. Your job is to inform the public, and so you should constantly be trying to make sure you're getting the public the best information you can. Next, be cautious when making promises, but keep promises you make. The case here is, don't go out and make a bunch of promises you can't keep. Okay? If you're going to make a promise, you need to make sure you keep it. If you tell somebody something, then you really need to be able to do it. Now, the case is, though, is you should be careful about making promises. Don't make them in general. 2 areas I can tell you real quickly that people oftentimes make promises as journalists that are mistakes. One is people oftentimes, because they have trouble trusting you, they're not 100% sure they know you, they'll oftentimes say, hey, would you mind if I read your story before it goes to press? And sometimes people will say, yeah, you can take a look at it. Well, to begin with, there's 2 problems to that. First one is most companies have rules against it, because they don't want you to go out there and to gather a bunch of information and then have the sources tell you, oh, I didn't like what you wrote, and tell you to kill it, and then they've got a story that's basically, they can't use, and they've just paid you all this money to go out and research and write something that they're not even going to get to use. The other reason is that they don't want you to do it is because libel requires, there's sort of a couple of keys to being charged with libel. Libel is where you print false or misleading information and it harms the person. So you have to prove that what you wrote harmed the person, but you also have to prove that you had or should have had the ability to know that what you said was wrong. And so if you give somebody the story and they tell you and they say, well, you've got it wrong. And you say, well, what have I got wrong? Well, I'm not telling you. You've got it wrong. I don't think you should go with the story. And you're like, well, I don't know what I did wrong. I think it's a good story. The story needs to be told. This is an important story. I'm going to run it. Well, if they tell you that after reading your story that you have it wrong, even though they won't tell you, they now have proven that you had the ability to know that you had it wrong. No question about it. And so you have basically opened yourself up to libel. If they didn't read it and they didn't tell you that, you would be able to get around that claim that you had ability to know. Now, you might have had the ability to know, but you wouldn't have a direct, basically somebody being able to testify, I read your story, you have it wrong. Okay? That's very carefully doing it. So that's one place where people can oftentimes be told, that, they'll make a promise, oh, you can read it. Don't ever make a promise people can read it. Because people will come in and they'll try to change it, they'll try to adjust it, they'll try to do other things, and so don't ever make that promise. Another promise people will oftentimes make is they'll make promises like, oh, well, this will run on Tuesday, or I'll update this tonight, do things like that. Well, if you say you're going to do it, then you really need to do it, otherwise you lose your credibility. But you oftentimes, because news changes, you need to be very careful and say, look, we're going to probably try to have this out Tuesday, but you never know. Because sometimes other news, 9/11 could happen. A lot of other things could happen, and then you aren't able to keep that promise. So when you make a promise, you need to keep it. But you need to be very careful and realize that promises don't always get kept. And promises you should never make are that people can read your story and when the thing is going to run. Because those are two promises people are oftentimes guilty of, but you just need to be honest. And that's the way it needs to be about everything. If somebody asks you, well, can you promise me that you'll do this? I can't promise you I'll do it, but I'll try, and here's the, you need to be very careful about that. But if you make a promise, you really need to keep it.